Demai, Parakeh, Mishnah, Dalin. In our last Mishnah, we talked about the idea of buying from a nachtom, from a baker. Let's do that carefully, nachtom. And the problem was if a person is going to be ma'aser, min ha'chiyuv al ha'ptur, or min ha'ptur al ha'chiyuv. You didn't know if the grain that was used to bake the bread that you bought, okay, was from an Amaretz that did take off Ma'aser, and therefore his grain was Patur, or the Amaretz was from an Amaretz that didn't take off Ma'aser, and there was Chiyuv. And you're not allowed to take off Maasrot from one on both, which a person would normally do. That's what they would always do, from one on everything they bought, if one was Chayav and one was Patur. So therefore, the last Mishnah we learned talked about what happens if one was sonain, one was cool bread, i.e. old bread, and one was chama, and there was new bread. Could I take from new bread to old bread? Did I assume when I bought from a baker that the bread that he baked today was all from one Am Haaretz, grain of one Am Haaretz, or from two? Today we're going to talk about not when you didn't go to buy it from the baker, but you bought from the palter. Palter, the Bartunura says, is a person who buys from the nachtomim, who alokeach, the guy who buys from the bakers, kikarot harbei bebat echad. He buys many loaves at one time and sells them. He's a salesman. He's the bread guy. Okay, so he's not the baker. He goes to the baker and he buys. So the question is, did he buy it from one baker or did he buy it from a bunch of bakers? That's the machloket between our Tanaim. Says the Mishnah, halokeach min hapalter. You're buying from the bread man. Me'aser mikol tfus utfus. Remember we learned tfus utfus is different forms, different shapes of bread. So therefore, Rabbi Meir says that when you buy from the bread man, he has different suppliers. So the supplier for the lechem achid, it's called in Israel, white bread, regular bread, okay, is different than the supplier for the challah or the whole wheat bread. Since he has different suppliers, you have to assume that this might be chiyuv and this might be p'tur, or the other way around. And I can't take ma'aser from one tfus to another. Obviously, if I bought two chalot, I can take off from this one to that one because it was bought from the same baker, and therefore either both are chiyuv or both are p'tur. That's fine. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer me'echad alakol. Rabbi Yehuda says no. You can take off even if I have two different tfusim. The palter buys from one supplier, and therefore you can take off as long as it's the same day. Therefore, you can take off from one to the other, and it's all chiyuv on chiyuv or p'tur ala p'tur. Let's just see the Bartanura. Rabbi Yehuda savar palter michad nachtom zavan. He buys it from one baker. Va'afapish mishnehem tfusim. Even though it's two shapes, kulam minachtom echadim. It's all from one baker. Hilkach. Therefore, im kulam mishel emesh or mishel hayom. Even if they're all from yesterday or today, ma'aser miakad alakol kidin nachtom. It's the same as the nachtom. Back to our Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, a very interesting thing, which you learn a lot about the history of the times of the Mishnah. So Rabbi Yehuda says you could buy, if you buy it from the palter, from the bread salesman, you could do be'echad alakol. But modeh Rabbi Yehuda belokeach min hamanpol. You might recognize this word. Manpol sounds very much like another word that you know. Monopoly. What's a manpol, a monopoly? So the Bartanura says a manpol is someone who's koneh min palterin arbei umocher la'acharim. He's like a central supplier. Someone who's koneh, someone who buys from a lot of different bread salesmen. But the Rav Safrai says in the Pirush Eretz Yisrael, I think this is more plausible and a better explanation, that the Roman government used to give the right of the bread salesman, especially in smaller areas, to a manpol. They would have a license. One person would license to sell bread. The Romans were very much interested in maintaining prices. They wanted the bread was considered a staple, the grain was considered a staple. At the very least, everyone should have the right to buy bread at a certain controlled price. For that reason, in order not to spur competition, I guess, competition would sometimes raise prices or lower prices. For that reason, they would sometimes give the right to sell the bread to a manpol, to a monopoly. But the manpol, Rabbi Yehuda says, he agrees, even though normally the palter buys from one baker. If he's a manpol, therefore, shu ma'aser mikol echad ve'echad. You have to buy from kol echad ve'echad, okay, from each different tfus. Why? Because then the manpol, it's obvious that the manpol bought from different suppliers, different tfus. I assume Rabbi Meir says if you bought two chalot from the manpol, you got it from the same guy. But if you bought a challah and a white bread and a lechem achid from the manpol, it's clear because he had the right to buy he had to buy from different people. He was the only one who could buy from different bakers. Therefore, ma'aser mikol echad ve'echad, you have to take from each one separately. Why? Because this could be chiyuv and this could be p'tur. or this could be ptur and this could be chiyuv, and you're not allowed to take mina ptur ala chiyuv, and vice versa. Okay, if you have any comments or questions, let's go back to the top. As always, rspolter@gmail.com. I want to dedicate our learning to the memory of my father, Harav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a great day.